Hello, welcome back to my channel, a place where you can let go of your stress while listening to stories found on the internet, or not. You can call me DW, for those who didn't know. So just grab your favorite drink, sit back, and relax. Well now, let's start by turning down the background music, shall we? This is part 5 of a 7-part story. If you haven't finished the previous stories, it is highly recommended to do so before you continue on. There's a link in the description if you want to find it, so no worries. Let's start the story. Part 5. The Pit. The basement's entrance was dark. Drafts of cold, wet air billowed up into my face out of the cavernous hole in the floor. To say the least, I didn't feel great about what we were about to do. "Well," Frank said from his wheelchair beside us, "go ahead down. I'll follow behind. I'm afraid Rufus needs to assist me. I have some difficulty with stairs." Another gust of mildew-scented air. Sasha, Dr. Raid, and I, all standing in front of this mysterious hole in the ground, all looked at each other expectantly. "Ladies first," Sasha said with slight hope in his voice. But Dr. Raid, the most steadfast of the group up until this point, only shook her head. I sighed somewhat heavily and gripped my camera a bit tighter. So much for only being a scribe. I took the first step down onto the creaking wood and into the darkness below. Hesitantly, 2 other sets of feet followed behind me. Then, as we stood in the dark underground, a brief period of clanking and struggle as Rufus moved Frank in his wheelchair slowly down the steps. I was fiddling with my camera setting to account for the change in light, but I didn't miss one curious detail about our host's descent. There, in his withered hands, he clutched the telephone. I doubted this house had outlets in its basement, and there was no sign of an extension cord in either of the man's hands. I wondered if a good portion of Frank's ritual would be standing in the darkness, futilely waiting for a call that would never come. "Let's go then," Frank said amiably, now that his chair was on the basement floor. His voice echoed against the brick walls. "Rufus, you know the way." With that, the lanky figure pushed the man further into the basement, away from the light of the entrance and further into the darkness. And I, feeling more and more like a sheep being led to slaughter, led the group behind them. The next events are difficult to describe, not because I lack the words or the stomach, but because, for much of the experience, I couldn't see. Soon after departing from the door, it became so dark that even shapes became indistinguishable, and we moved gingerly, guided only by the squeaking of Frank's wheelchair and the steady footsteps of Rufus. I found that I had an advantage over the others, though. I could take photos blindly of my surroundings, the flash allowing the resulting photos to show me exactly what I was walking through. A terrifying way to find your way around, and liable to unpleasant surprises, but it was something. It was a dark, cramped space. The picture that I showed you last time is one of my guiding pictures. In reality, all that it shows was shrouded in darkness to me. Seeing the narrowness of the walls caused a flare-up of claustrophobia in me that I hadn't realized I had. With each moment of light, I also saw the shifting shapes of those around me, only shadows moving tentatively before disappearing back into invisibility. At one point, my heart nearly stopped as I brushed against something strange on my right. I stumbled slightly as my walking was interrupted, and someone bumped into me from behind. "Ah!" Sasha's voice exclaimed through the quiet. "Sorry," I said back in a hushed voice. The squeaking of the wheels paused for a second. "Everything okay back there?" Frank's voice floated back from slightly ahead. Yeah," I called back. "I just tripped." The wheels and footsteps started again, but I turned toward what I hoped was the direction of whatever I had run into. I snapped a picture, but when I looked at what the camera showed me, my stomach sank. Bags. Of what? I had no clue. They were small and hanging from the ceiling. Black, like trash bags, with something in them weighing them down. Too small for an adult human corpse, I know, but perhaps for a limb or an organ or an animal or a child. And yet, I said nothing, just turned back towards the sound of footsteps and continued walking. We continued for some time. At one point, the thought struck me that it was impossible for the extent of this basement to only lie under Frank's house. It must scale under a large portion of his property. I wondered what the purpose of such a structure could have been. I wondered what its purpose became as well. Eventually, we got to a point where some light was shed on our surroundings. There was a small window towards the top of the basement, though it was covered in ivy, the same ivy that was pushing its way into Frank's house. And through the gears of the computer in his yard, a bit of a dust light came in, but it was impossible to tell what the outside looked like from the blocked grass. I blinked slightly to adjust for the new light. Then the squeaking stopped. Rufus had ceased walking and turned Frank around to face myself, Dr. Reid, and Sasha. "We're here. Everyone make it all right?" "We're fine," Dr. Reid said, speaking on our behalf. "Wonderful." I was beginning to become anxious. Well, I had already become anxious long before we ever entered the basement. But here, the anxiety was becoming significant. In the dim and ever dwindling light of the window outside, I could see Frank and Rufus foggily a few feet in front of me. "Rufus, get the supplies." The taller man immediately walked away from the group and into the edges of the darkness. I could hear various clanging and moving of objects, and I wondered how Rufus could possibly find anything farther into the basement, where the light of the window didn't reach. Frank smiled at us and leaned back slightly in his chair, relaxed. "Now, what you're about to take part in here may seem unconventional," he said, "but I assure you in the world of supernatural science, this is cutting edge." Sasha let out a short, animalistic nervous chortle next to me. "Supernatural and science, not exactly concepts often paired up, no?" The supernatural is only anything out of the ordinary because it is difficult to prove, much like the Earth's rotation or the discovery of cells. Science is myth before it is truth, but proof the supernatural exists, has always existed, and will continue to exist, and it's no longer super. It's just another part of the natural world. Sasha didn't say anything to this, and neither did anyone else. Rufus had reappeared into the light, carrying various items: a long metal rod, a mysterious plastic jug of something dark, 2 shovels, and, of course, a black trash bag, much like the ones I had run into earlier. "Thank you, Rufus," Frank said, still in good spirits. Then he addressed his guest. "Our first step is to dig a small pit, the purpose of which will become clear to you soon. Rufus and I are old, tired men. Would 2 of you mind doing the digging?" For the first time, I looked down at what I was standing on. Whereas the floor at the start of the basement had been stone, this area was dark, wet dirt. I looked at Dr. Raid and Sasha. Sasha took what may have been a subconscious step backwards, as though to count himself out of the running for digger. "I can help," Dr. Raid said, then looked to me expectantly. Dr. Raid gave me a small nod, and I set my camera down as we both moved forward to take the shovels from Rufus. Dr. Raid took hers, then I took mine. As I did, I made the mistake of looking up into Rufus' face. It had the look, the same one it had had when I found the computer, or when I had been in the rabbit room. Like I was somewhere I absolutely was not supposed to be. And more, I was beginning to agree with him. "Where do you want it?" Dr. Raid asked, and Frank laughed. "You can tell far better than I can. Pick the spot that looks best to you." Dr. Raid and I exchanged glances. She shrugged slightly before pressing her shovel into the ground. I did the same, the cold earth giving way to the sharp shovel's spade. Next time, the ritual. Well then, that's the end of part 5. Well, what do you think? Is the story good? Let me know in the comment section down below, and please subscribe if you haven't yet. We'll see you again next time. Sweet dreams.